Welcome to Learn English with Horror Stories. The Old House on Pine Street. Chapter 1. The Strange Noise. Sarah was new in town. She moved into an old house on Pine Street last week. The house was big and cheap, but there was something strange about it. All the neighbors stayed away from it. They never looked at the house when they walked by. The first few nights were quiet. Sarah slept well in her new bedroom on the second floor. But on Monday night, everything changed. It started with a sound. Tap, tap, tap. Sarah opened her eyes. The clock showed 3 a.m. The tapping was coming from somewhere inside the walls. Tap, tap, tap. It's just the old pipes, she told herself. But the sound wasn't like pipes at all. It was more like fingernails. She pulled her blanket up to her chin. The tapping got louder. Tap, tap, tap. Then she heard something else. A voice, very quiet like a whisper. Sarah, it called. Sarah. Her heart started beating fast. Nobody in town knew her name yet. She was sure of that. The voice came again, closer this time. Sarah, come to the basement. Sarah's whole body was shaking now. There was no way she would go to the basement. But then she remembered something that made her blood turn cold. This house didn't have a basement. Tap, tap, tap. The sound was in her room now. Sarah jumped out of bed and ran to turn on the light. Nothing happened. The power was out. In the darkness, she could see something moving on her wall. A black shadow. It was shaped like a person but too tall, with arms that were too long. The shadow was getting bigger, coming closer. Sarah tried to scream, but no sound came out. The shadow reached for her with its long, dark fingers. Then she saw its face. Where eyes should be, there were only empty black holes. Its mouth opened wider and wider, showing rows of sharp teeth. Welcome home, Sarah, it said in that horrible whisper. Sarah ran. She ran out of her room, down the stairs, and out of the house. Her bare feet hit the cold street, but she didn't stop. Behind her, she could still hear that awful voice laughing. When she finally looked back, the house was different. All the windows were glowing with a strange red light. And in her bedroom window, she saw the shadow person, waving at her with its long fingers. Sarah knew she would never go back to that house. But as she stood there shaking in the dark street, she heard the whisper one last time. You can run, Sarah, but this is your home now. You'll come back. They always come back. Chapter 2. What Lives in the Darkness. Sarah spent 3 days at a cheap motel. She couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that shadow thing with its long fingers and black hole eyes. But she had a bigger problem. All her things were still in that house. Her clothes, her money, her phone, everything. I have to go back, she whispered to herself. Just one quick trip. During the day, the sun was bright when she walked down Pine Street. Her hands were shaking as she held the house key. Some neighbors were outside today working in their gardens. But when they saw her walking toward the old house, they quickly went inside and locked their doors. The house looked normal in the daylight. No red glow in the windows. No shadows. Sarah took a deep breath and put the key in the lock. The door opened with a long creak. Inside, everything was covered in dust. That was strange. There hadn't been any dust 3 days ago. It looked like nobody had lived here for years. Her footprints were the only marks in the thick gray dust on the floor. Hello, she called out. Her voice echoed through the empty rooms. No answer. Sarah walked up the stairs slowly, holding tight to the railing. Each step made a loud cracking sound. At the top of the stairs, she saw her bedroom door. It was closed. She was sure she'd left it open when she ran away. Her hand shook as she reached for the doorknob. It was ice cold. The door swung open. Sarah screamed. Her bedroom was gone. Instead of her bed and furniture, there was a huge black hole in the floor. The walls were covered in strange marks that looked like claw scratches. And there was writing on the ceiling, hundreds of names scratched into the wood. The last name on the list was Sarah. Then she heard it. That horrible whisper. You came back, they always come back. The door slammed shut behind her. Sarah pulled on the doorknob, but it wouldn't move. The temperature in the room dropped. Sarah could see her breath in the air. The black hole in the floor started to make a sound, like thousands of people whispering all at once. From the hole, dark shapes began to climb out. Shadow people, dozens of them with their long arms and empty black eyes. Sarah recognized their faces. They were the same faces she had seen in old photographs in the town library, all the missing people who had lived in this house before her. "Join us, Sarah," they whispered together. "Be part of our family." Sarah backed up against the wall. The shadow people came closer. Their cold fingers reached for her. Then she saw something even worse coming out of the hole. It was bigger than the others, like a giant spider made of darkness. It had too many arms, too many legs, and hundreds of eyes that glowed red. "I've been waiting so long for you, Sarah," it said in a voice that sounded like breaking glass. "I am the keeper of this house. For 100 years, I've been collecting special people like you. People who can see me. People who can hear me. And now you're here?" Its arms stretched out, filling the room with darkness. Sarah couldn't see anything except those red eyes. "Your name is on our wall now," it said. "You belong to the house. To me." Sarah felt the cold fingers of the shadow people on her arms, her legs, her neck. They were pulling her toward the hole. "No," she screamed. "Let me go." But then she looked down into the hole and saw what was at the bottom. It was another world, a dark place full of twisted shadows and red lights. She could see all the missing people down there, walking like zombies through empty streets that never ended. They were trapped in the keeper's world forever. Sarah fought hard. She kicked and screamed and pulled away from the shadow hands. One of her feet found the edge of the hole. She was slipping. The keeper laughed. The sound made the whole house shake. "Even if you escape today," it said, "you'll come back. The house owns you now. Every night you'll hear us calling. Every time you close your eyes, you'll see our world. And one day, when you can't take it anymore, you'll come running back to us." Sarah's foot slipped again. The shadow people pulled harder. "No," Sarah said. "No." She reached into her pocket and pulled out the one thing she'd brought with her, a small cross that belonged to her grandmother. She held it up. The shadow people screamed. Their fingers let go. Even the keeper moved back, its red eyes turning away from the cross. Sarah ran. She ran faster than she'd ever run before. Down the stairs, through the dusty rooms, out the front door. She ran and ran until she couldn't run anymore. Behind her, the house had changed again. Now it looked older than ever, like it was rotting away. But all the windows were glowing red, and in every window she could see them, the shadow people, watching her, waiting. The keeper's voice followed her on the wind. "Run away, little Sarah. Run as far as you can. But remember, your name is on our wall. You're one of us now, and we'll be waiting, waiting, waiting." Sarah left town that same day. She got on a bus and rode it as far as it would go. But sometimes late at night she still hears the whispers. Sometimes in dark rooms she sees long shadow fingers reaching for her. And sometimes in her dreams she sees her name scratched into that ceiling, and she knows the keeper is still waiting. Because the shadow people were right about one thing. Once the house chooses you, you can never really escape. The end.